We've been talking about the hero's journey for the past month. And following through Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces. And we've taken a look at the actual arc of the hero's journey and all of the pieces of it. And I had planned on digging into some stuff I didn't get to last week because I was kind of chatty, as well as some more things that Joseph talks about in that really excellent book. But the events of the past week have inspired me to speak about something else. I want to preface this by saying that I do my best to keep politics out of this sanctuary. What I'm going to talk about today is really more about our culture. And the subject matter may have been brought on by the political arena, but really it's about who we are as a people and what is going on in our society right now. It's interesting, this past really couple of years, we've seen dredged up out of our collective unconsciousness the racism that has been there all along, even 50 years after the civil rights era, when we thought we had that down pretty well. We have seen too many people of color dying at the hands of our law enforcement authorities. We've seen too many injustices. Paul said, "In all things, give thanks." He did not say for all things, give thanks. But in this time, which has been tumultuous and difficult for some of us to understand, we can at least give thanks that maybe this time, finally, we're going to get it right. Maybe this time we can finally learn to live together in peace no matter what our skin looks like. And then this past week we had something else surface from deep in our collective subconscious. And that is the inherent sexism in our culture. The way we treat women, the way we allow women to be treated. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for or vote against in this election. But if we, in all things, give thanks, I think we can at least thank Mr. Trump for showing us just how endemic sexism has been in our society. 3 out of 4 women in their lifetime will be abused in some way. They will be sexually assaulted, they will be abused, they will be raped. And so much of that happens below the level of consciousness. I mean, it takes an extremely low consciousness to even begin that kind of behavior. But the fact that in so many instances it is allowed to happen, it is not immediately protested, it is not immediately brought to light, it remains lurking in the basement of our subconscious, our collective subconscious. As I was examining the emergence of our underlying sexism and racism, I was wondering, how am I going to talk about this? I'm a white guy. I am a straight, cisgendered white male. A lot of people think of me as the enemy. How can I understand what that journey is like? How do I understand what it's like to be a woman and to be afraid to even speak when something wrong is happening? How do I understand that? How do I understand what it feels like to be a person of color and be afraid every time I walk out my door? How do I wrap my mind around that? And then I remembered my childhood, growing up in a violent home, being forced to listen while my mother was beaten as a child, being too afraid to do anything, being paralyzed by fear. So I think I understand a little what that's like to not feel safe to even speak up, to not feel safe enough to make what's happening stop, to not know what would happen to me if I tried. But there comes a moment in all of our stories when we have to speak. For me, in my story, it happened at about 3 o'clock in the morning in the parking lot of St. Joseph's Hospital. Where they were sewing up my sister, who had tried to get between my mother and my father. And I turned to my mother and I said, "Don't you think it's about time you took legal action?" And she burst into tears. But the next week, she filed for divorce. We didn't know what was going to happen to us. My mom had never really supported herself. She didn't know how we were going to get by. Not too long after they were divorced, my mother and my sister and I all got jobs. And we survived. And we didn't have to put up with that ever again. If you remember back to the week when I talked about the beginning of the hero's journey, and I described the herald of the hero's journey in the call to adventure. The herald or announcer of the adventure is often dark, loathly, or terrifying, judged evil by the world. And so it is, I think, today. Unfortunately, we are not being guided into the journey that we must take in consciousness to raise our society to a level of consciousness that our brother and way shower Jesus would have had us live in. It is taking someone dark and loathsome to do that. We are not being gently invited. We are being pushed. And you know, the thing about it is, as we deal with these people, as we deal with people who think that it's okay for them to exert their will on others, whether it is right or wrong, sometimes we not only have to speak up, sometimes speaking up is not enough. I remember I was in my first senior year in college, and 5 of my buddies and I had jumped into Ed Ploy's old Oldsmobile and gone down to Florida to see the Gator Bowl, where we got our tails handed to us. It was a freezing rain, and we were getting killed in the third quarter, so we all took off and left for the Keys. One of the guys in that group was somewhat problematic. He would refuse to ride on the hump, and he would, always veto any place he didn't want to go to eat. And finally, after, several hundred miles of this and several days, we confronted him. And he said, well, I'm not going to do what you tell me to do. I'm just going to do what you make me do. That same sociopathic, juvenile, selfish mindset is what we have sadly allowed to flourish in this society when confronted by people who have money, power, rank, and privilege. And they take that, they take what they want. If you're famous, you can do anything. That's what they think. And it's up to us to hear that call and to be heroes in our own lives and in our own culture. I know it's not easy. I know that fear can be paralyzing. But it's what we're called to do. Nobody wrote stories about a coward's journey. It's called the hero's journey for a reason. We are being called today in a way that we have never been called before. And at a very personal level, we are the ones doing the calling. It is our own Christ nature, that very core of us that has finally risen in consciousness to the point where it simply cannot abide in what has been allowed to be. We are called to stop what must stop. And we are called to become that which we truly are in spirit. We are called to live up to the Christ nature of each one of us. Jesus said 2,000 years ago that the most important commandments we had were to love God and love each other as we love ourselves. 2,000 years later, we struggle with that simple idea. But we are finally getting to a breaking point. As uncomfortable as it is, as ugly as the images are, the video, the audio, the pictures that we see, as disheartening as some of the news stories that are bombarding us every day seem to be, in those things we can give thanks. Because all of it's being brought up to be healed. All of the dirt, all of the darkness that's been swimming around in the substrata is finally coming to light where it can be healed. If we don't know about it, we can't fix it. And I know that we want to make villains out of the people who are bringing it to us, but we can't do that. We can't do that. We can't call them pigs because it's lowering us in consciousness, and it's an insult to perfectly nice pigs everywhere. What we are called to do is to speak our truth Now, there may be times when something ends, when a marriage ends, when a job ends, when an opportunity ends, when a relationship ends, because we stand up for the truth of who we are. Take it from a kid who has been through a few endings. There's life on the other side. And yeah, just like in the hero's journey, even though it seems like we die, we are reborn. And the gift of that is not only do we not have to live with the memory of having stood idly by, but we don't have to hate ourselves for the rest of our lives for having allowed it. So whatever that price is that we have to pay in that moment, when we say, no, you are not allowed to do that. Not here, not ever. Whatever price we have to pay, it's going to be worth it. Because what we're doing is we are cleaning out the collective unconscious. And it's not just for us. It's for our children. It's for our sons and our daughters and their sons and daughters. We have a responsibility to them to fix this, to end racism, to end sexism, to end all of those isms that have kept us separate as people. You know, for right now, those of us who have sons need to teach our sons, you don't ever have the right to a woman's body unless she tells you you do, in very explicit terms. And we need to teach our daughters that their bodies are not the coin of the realm to be paid to every ogre under every bridge they cross. We owe our sons and daughters that. And we owe our parents, sons and daughters, that. For each and every one of us, we will be presented with our own road of trials. We will be given our own opportunities to rise in consciousness. For some of us, this may be very easy, and for others, it may come at a tremendous price. But I believe deep in my heart that we as a species are outgrowing the hate and the selfishness that have kept so many of us prisoner for so long. We are alive in this time to change. And we are the heroes who have been called to make it happen. Please join me in prayer. Sweet Spirit, for all the people who have gone before, all those who have been harmed by others, all those who lived in fear, we ask your blessings of peace and freedom upon their spirits. And today we affirm that we will go forward and do that which is ours to do. We will allow our voices to be heard. We will do the deeds that need to be done. We will live as our brother and wayshower, Jesus the Christ, taught us when he said to love, simply to love. And we will accept that peace in our heart that passes understanding, even now. For your love, for your peace, and for your spirit, we say thank you. Thank you, God. So it is.